Today we'll be covering the maps section of the DHIS2 analysis. So I'll be asking questions, of course, as usual, and I hope that you will unmute yourself and answer whenever I ask a question, because to keep things a bit more interactive. And also that because today is a public holiday, I'm also joining from home, so I'll also feel bold, kind of bold answer. So please make sure that we'll try to keep this session as interactive as possible. Okay, so let's start the session. Right, so in this session, what I'm hoping to do, one thing is that I'll be introducing you to what is the DHIS2 Maps application, right? And also with the DHIS2 Maps application, I will also mention like few concepts of GIS, right? What is Geographic Information System, why we are using maps, and a little bit of historic information about how the maps have been used and the GIS has been used for public health in the past. With that historic information, we will move on to the DHIS2 Maps application. And I'll be demonstrating what we can do with the DHIS2 Maps application. So this is one tool in DHIS2 which has really evolved in heaps and bounds in last couple of years. Because if you have been using DHIS2 for maybe a little over 3 years, you would remember the previous application we had, which was the GIS application in DHIS2. Of course, the concepts that we had in the GIS application in DHIS2, which we had about 3 years back, remains the same. But what is more important is that over the years, especially in the last 2 years, there have been a lot of new features that has been added into the Maps application, which really is now very competitive as a visualization tool in public health information systems. Because like I must mention that the DHIS2 Maps application has a lot of limitations compared to a full-blown, full-fledged GIS application. There are many of them that you might be using or you might have heard. So we don't have all these functionality in our DHIS2 Maps application, but of course there's a lot that you can do with it. Okay, and also we will be mentioning you about the layering concept in the DHIS2 Maps application, how these layers work when we want to visualize something using this application. Right. So this is what we hope to cover, and there are 8 sections in the demonstration that I want to show you, right? And also I must mention, right, in your learning management system, LMS, right, there is a book, right, for DHIS2 Maps for today. And if you just follow that, because in case what I have realized even last few days is like some of you, okay, so what we advise you to do is just observe what we are doing when we are demonstrating, and you can just practice it later. Okay. But if you feel now that, because we are into the 7th day, that if you feel that you are kind of confident in trying out some features while we are demonstrating, you are certainly free to do that. But make sure that, to guide you with the process, even if you are doing it later, there is a book under today's session on day 7, Maps, which is there in your LMS, which you can refer, which will mention all the steps that we are doing when we are demonstrating with the screenshots. So you can just follow it once we complete the demonstration, so you can get an idea and also practice by yourself. Right? So that will be, I think, more beneficial rather than you trying to do as we do it, because you might miss what we are doing it, and you might even sometimes complain that for us to go slower because you want to practice it. But the thing is, like, then what might happen is that you may be consuming too much time from the demonstration that might even affect others. So what I would advise is just follow that demonstration guide that is there after the sessions, and demonstrating, just follow what we are doing. Okay, now I'm showing you a slide which has a picture of a person, and then also there's another diagram. So any one of you, maybe some of the Sri Lankan participants may be familiar with this slide if you have participated in some academies that I have conducted. So I prefer that you won't go first at it when I'm asking the question. So, like any of you who is familiar with what I'm showing here? I mean, there's a person and there's a diagram. What is this? Any guesses?
It's
Jon
Jon Snow.
Cholera epidemic in London.
Awesome. Yes, great. So, okay, I did not expect that kind of a fast response, but well done. Yes. So, this person that you're seeing here is a person called Jon Snow, right? So, don't confuse it with the Jon Snow that you may have seen in, of course, where else in recent times?
Game of Thrones.
Yes, of course. This is not the Jon Snow that you see in Game of Thrones. This is somebody totally different. And this other diagram that you're seeing is a map. Okay, right. So why this is so relevant to what we are doing today is like this particular person who's a doctor, physician, what he did was there was one cholera epidemic that happened around 1850s in London, United Kingdom, right? And they were not sure, right? What was the source of this cholera infection, right? So there was a lot of public health interventions that was underway. To one thing is, of course, the curative care sector. They were trying to cure these patients, and the public health drive, which was there in the London health system that time, was trying to find out what was the cause of this cholera epidemic, right? Because you all know that if you don't understand and identify the source of cholera infection, you are not able to treat it. So because of that, one thing this particular person did was he just did something very simple. He tried to draw this diagram. So this diagram is, of course, a boundary of a particular area in London, right? And in that boundary, of course, please pardon me that you can't see this diagram clearly, of course. But like what you can see is in this diagram, which has a kind of a demarcation like this, there are some dots, right? These black color dots, which you find in certain places. So these dots are individual locations where the cholera patients were reported. Okay. So what he did was he drew this map and kind of marked the spots, right? The coordinates of locations of the patients who were reported from cholera, right? So then finally what he was able to develop is this diagram, and this is what we in modern terms refer to as a kind of a spot map. So basically what he did was designing a spot map, and with this spot map you were able to understand areas of hotspot, and with that he was able to investigate it further, and based on this hotspot he was able to identify the source of this cholera infection, which was of course a water pump that was located in certain part of London. So what he did was he kind of removed the handle of it and kind of took this public health intervention to identify the source of the infection, and with that he was able to get rid of this cholera outbreak that happened in London, Broad Street region. Right? So because of this particular intervention that he did, he is in fact recognized in certain sources as a father of modern epidemiology. This is about what happened with Dr. Jon Snow in 1854. And this incident is considered, because of the importance of it, this is considered as a historic event where the GIS, right? Because here what happened was the geography was added to the already collected list of patients, right? The other information about the line list of the patients was already there. But what was done as a new intervention was adding the geography. So because of that, this is considered as the first instance where we have applied the GIS in modern history, right? Okay. So with this background information, let us look at what we mean by geographic information system, right? So any guesses, like what do we mean by GIS in simple terms? Anybody who can explain what we mean by GIS? Systems and what actually does it define?
Information related to the locations.
Okay, information related to the locations. So is it just about location, or is it kind of a combination of it? Location plus something else?
Yes, data should be there. It's a spatial data.
Yes. So what we do here is we have spatial data, which is the geographic data, and we try to combine this geographic data with some existing data that we have. So this existing data could be a table of some information about a list of patients, right? We may have some demographic information about list of patients, such as the name, age, gender, and maybe that patient was vaccinated or not, right? When he was vaccinated. So that information may be present as a table. And what we are trying to do is we are trying to add the geographic information into that existing list, the information that we already have. Okay, right. So basically what you're seeing here is an extensive definition about what GIS is, right? So here it says it's a computer system for capturing, storing, checking, and displaying data related to positions on Earth's surface, right? GIS can show many different kind of data on one map. This enables people to more easily see and analyze and understand patterns and relationships, right? Okay, now this is a kind of a very extensive definition. But what I will try to do is I will just try to show you what we try to do here by applying GIS into public health data. Okay, so here we have general data. Okay, so for example, what you are seeing here, right? So what do you see here? Now, I think this table is kind of a table that you are really familiar with. Of course, this column may not be familiar to most of the participants who are not from Sri Lanka. So these are a set of facilities or areas within a particular province in Sri Lanka, right? And then these are some figures of a number of children screened. Okay. So basically, this is a pivot table that we usually have in DHIS2. Okay. So far in DHIS2, what we have done is we had this information which were there in pivot table, data visualizer, right? So this information was already there, okay? And what we try to do here in by using the maps application or GIS is to add into this information some geographic data. So basically, for example, if these are areas, right? This, I mean, like we may know that this Akurana is a particular area, right? So if you are not from Sri Lanka, especially, I mean, for most of you participants, if I just mention this area, what happens is you won't understand, you won't have a clue of where this location where this place is located in Sri Lanka. Okay, so in a public health perspective, is there a particular value, right, in identifying the geographic location of a place when you are trying to interpret a certain scenario? Is there a value in it? If so, what is the value? What is the value of having a geographic information about a particular location when you are trying to interpret data? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll assume that in case you have to have any intervention, you know exactly where that intervention is supposed to take place.
Yes, that I can take as a correct answer. Good. So basically, if you even take the example of this Jon Snow, what happened was like when you know the location of a patient, right? So you can try to relate. So basically, you know where to go and find the patient, and maybe you can with that information you can take an intervention. And also, just a little bit expanding on your answer, what the other thing I can do is if you have an idea about a particular location of a patient, you may be able to see from the map what are the areas, right, that may be surrounded by the location of the patient, that location where the patient is residing. Say, for example, just by looking at a map, I'll be able to figure out, okay, now if this patient is located in this particular point, which is point A, there is a mountainous area which is near to that place. And maybe there's one stream or there's a river that is just adjacent to the location of that house of that patient. So if there is a river, and maybe like if there is another source of contamination of water which is about 1 kilometer up in the river, then I might be able to relate, okay, now maybe because this river is located in close proximity to the house of that patient, he may be consuming water from that river. So that kind of idea we can get, right, before even actually visiting that patient. So that is one thing, yes. And in addition, I would also mention another thing. Say, for example, now, if you are not from Sri Lanka, and if I just mention this area called Akurana, you would not have any idea where this Akurana is, right? So, for example, it may be located in this in one of these coastal areas, right? And this is, in fact, now this area is a kind of a very dry part of Sri Lanka, right? So, I mean, if the Akurana is located somewhere here, like, and if we are trying to analyze a health problem, we may be able to, contribute to analysis part of that particular disease by attributing to the location. Say, for example, if I know that, okay, now this patient is from this dry zone of Sri Lanka, there may be some other issues, like he may not have access to safe water, right, which may have contributed. And also, if you are from a coastal region, there may be other, like, say, for example, if you are thinking of like iodine deficiency, okay, now we can assume if this area is, this Akurana is located in a coastal part of Sri Lanka, they may have free access to salt and maybe fish, right? So we can assume, like, it's kind of like, if I see a high number of iodine deficiency cases located in this coastal area, I can assume, okay, this is kind of very unlikely because these people are having very good access to iodine, right? So this may be a data quality issue rather than actually, this kind of this number of reporting of a high number of patients with iodine deficiency is possible. So I would say no, this can't be a possible reporting. This, of course, have to be some issue with the data quality. But in fact, like, if that location is somewhere in the mountainous part of Sri Lanka where you don't have that much of access to salt, iodinated salt, and or else the fish, then we might be able to assume, okay, yeah, maybe that number of patients reporting from this part could be possible. But that, for you to get that idea, if you don't have a kind of background information about the country, the location data becomes very important. So this is another use of the location data. So is everything clear up to this point? I assume so. Right, so let's try to proceed further. Right, so in the DHIS2 maps application, we try to achieve certain functionalities. So one is we try to design thematic maps of areas and points. So what we mean by thematic maps is something like what you're seeing here. So for example, what you're seeing here is an extract from Sierra Leone, right? So if this is Sierra Leone and this is ocean, right? So this is Sierra Leone, and in that Sierra Leone country, the entire country has been demarcated into certain maybe provinces or districts, right? And each of these districts had been colored in a particular color code, right? And the other thing that I can notice is that the colors differ, and also there's a kind of color gradient which you see, right? So for example, now here you are seeing a lighter color, and all the way up to here, you are seeing a darker color. And the values of which is related to each of this color also keeps on going up when you are going down this color gradient from lighter color all the way to the darker color. So basically you can get an idea just by looking at this map that you are trying to represent something, maybe a numeric value, and a better visualization or better demonstration of this numeric value, rather than you trying to show it using a table, would be to show the areas which these numeric values are coming from, right? So that kind of a visualization, which we try to achieve by DHIS2, just like what you see here, is called application of thematic maps. Okay, is that clear? Right. And then in addition, what we can do is we can view health facilities based on classification. So for example, we may have, we may be able to classify data such as, like data that is coming from base hospitals, national hospitals, district hospital, likewise. Or else we may be able to classify it based on the ownership, like whether the data coming from privately owned facility or else a state owned facility. That way, that way also we may be able to classify, right? So that's another thing that is possible by using DHIS2 maps. And also we are able to weave underlying data associated with the map. right? So that is also possible rather than, trying to go to pivot table and get a different table, right? Table visualization. You can, in the maps module itself, you'll be able to see the data as a table. We will show you how to do that. And in addition, something very important when we are designing our reports is that you can download the map for offline use, right? And also you are able to export the map for data use in other GIS applications. So these kind of functionality is there in the DHIS2 maps, and we will be going through all of them during the course of the day. And of course, there are a lot of usefulness when we are using maps. So one is it'll be providing spatial representation of the data. So spatial representation is like we have data which we usually show as a table or graph or chart, right? And that, of course, we are trying to put the geographic information into that, and we are trying to visualize it in a map, right? Something like this. So for example, you can see here the training land, and each of the districts in the training land is colored based on this legend that you see here, right? And this makes data more tangible to the end user. So if you are just demonstrating the end user a table, you won't really get a hang of it, right? I mean, okay, now it's kind of a list of rows. Yeah, I can see that these rows are representing different areas in a country, but that's it. But if you try to demonstrate the same thing in a graph or in a map, then it the user feels that it is more tangible, right? You can get a hang of it like, okay, now this data is coming from a coastal area. This is, of course, this particular area may be close to the capital city. So they may have better infrastructure and resources. So that's why their reporting rates are much better. So that way we'll be able to assume and interpret data in a much uh, tangible way, as you call it. And then it is also a fantastic way to share data with stakeholders and decision makers, right? So because everyone has a point of reference, because that's the beauty of it. Like when you have idea about the geography of a location, you will be able to, make your own interpretations, because you may feel, right, this may be due to this, right? That feeling you might get when you try to demonstrate something in maps. And then you can overlap information on local conditions and response. So better target intervention towards greatest need, right? So there are some other local conditions and response that you can maybe incorporate as separate layers in the map. And that way also you can get a better visualization, right? And in addition, you can also understand spatial relationships of public health phenomena. So that's the most important thing which I was trying to highlight by using the Jon Snow scenario, as well as that scenario I mentioned about the iodine deficiency in Sri Lanka. So you will be able to understand the spatial relationships and its effect on a particular public health phenomenon. So these are some great usefulnesses of the maps. Right. So when we are using the DHIS2 maps module, right, there are certain layers that we are using, right? And these layers could represent each of levels in the health facility. So that's one way of using the layers. So for example, we can have facilities, right? Now, one other thing that I'm not going into too much detail, because this is very specific. This session I'm doing is very specific about DHIS2 maps. Is that I'm not going into too much detail about the GIS, geographic concepts that has to come when you are kind of developing a map. So for example, now one thing is this points and shapes, right? So these are some technical terms that people use when they are using GIS. So, you don't actually need to understand all these complicated concepts in DHIS, in GIS, but what you have to understand is that when you think of a health facility, right, it may be one building, even though, in realistic way, this building itself is kind of a large area, maybe like it may be at least about 25-30 square meters. When you look at it from the space, right? Okay, compared to other areas of demarcation that you have on country. Say, for example, if you just consider this area occupied by a health facility or just one building, and you compare it with the area occupied by a district or province, you can consider that the area occupied by this building is negligible. So because of that, in a map, you will be able to highlight, right, location of a facility as a point, as just one dot, right, as opposed to district or province, which are actually big areas that you draw as circles. These are not actually circles, we call them polygons, right? Polygon, you may, I mean, like you can understand what a polygon is. Polygon is like a shape, maybe a circle kind of thing, which is not really a circle because it's an irregular shape, right? So basically these districts and provinces, when we draw on a map, they may be a shape or as a polygon, we call it. And when we mark a facility in a map, right, we use points. And these points in GIS concepts, like when we want to mark a point, there is like, I mean, how do we actually refer to a particular point that is located in a map, right? For example, there are two ways, right? There is a relative way of doing that or a specific way of doing that. Let me just take an example, right? So supposing, right, we want to know where the National Hospital of Sri Lanka is located. Can you tell me now, just it could be National Hospital of Sri Lanka or National Hospital of anywhere, right? So if you are to explain how explain to a person, right, how to locate the National Hospital of Sri Lanka, how would you explain it? Tell me two ways of explaining it, two different ways. Is my question clear? You are assigned the task, explain the location where the National Hospital of Sri Lanka is located in a two different way. How would you explain it to a person in two different ways? Anybody?
Maybe the region where that hospital is located can be one way.
Sorry, come again. It's not clear.
The region where that specific hospital or facility is located is one way.
Okay. And the next would be?
If you are asking about the spatial way of locating it.
Mm-hmm. Spatial way of locating, as in like how?
GIS. And the other one is the point that you say, the facility, the point.
Okay, right.
The latitude and longitude of the facility.
Exactly. You are somewhat there. Anybody else also wants to give it a try?
We can do it in a subjective or objective way, like subjective way.
Subjective or objective way, okay. I like that classification. So what do you mean by subjective?
Subjective means like we can tell in which district and like which area it is, like in a more understandable manner, like closer to which area and where it is. And objective means like through coordinates, by giving the latitudes and longitudes, you can give the exact point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good. So that's the answer I was expecting. Yes. So basically, she was using the terms subjective and objective. I would use the terms relative and specific, right? So her subjective would be my relative. So basically, like if you try to, so my question was like, if you're trying to explain the location of National Hospital of Sri Lanka to someone, the first way of looking at it is relative, or as she mentioned, subjective, right? So why it becomes relative or subjective is that when I am trying to explain that location to that person, okay, the thing is, right, I will have to mention, okay, so you have to reach Colombo, right? Maybe you have to reach Colombo Central Bus Station, and from that one you may have to take this particular route, right? So maybe like something like A4 route, and you come all the way up to this junction and take a turn from that junction and then walk around 10 minutes towards this particular building. And from there, you will see this big black color gate. And when you see that, you have to go through, I mean, like you have to go there, and maybe you may have to ask from another person, a particular building. So something like that, right? So this entire scenario assumes that the other person who's listening is kind of familiar with the locality that you explain, right? But say, for example, you try to explain this, I mean, location to Derry Bose, I mean, Jessica, right? Somebody who's not from Sri Lanka. You try to explain the location of National Hospital of Sri Lanka in the way that I mentioned just now. It'll be very confusing because that person is not familiar with the locality. So that is why it becomes relative, right? So you are just depending your explanation based on some landmarks which other person really needs to know. If that person has no idea about it, it becomes useless. The second point, of course, is specific, right? When specifics means like you are using maybe coordinates, latitude and longitude when you are defining. So if you are defining a location with latitudes and longitudes, you just don't need to have an idea about some knowledge about the locality. So even if you mention latitudes and longitudes of National Hospital of Sri Lanka, anybody from another country will also be able to locate it. They can just search in Google Maps. They can just type it in the latitude and longitude, and they will be able to pinpoint and understand where this area is, right? So is that clear? So basically, when we are defining health facilities in DHIS2, the organization units in DHIS2, if we are defining a health facility, we are defining it as a point. So basically, all the health facilities in DHIS2 will ideally should have a point defined in latitudes and longitudes. So basically, it will be a comma delimited two values. So you will have a latitude value, comma, a longitude value. It's like that. But quite contrarily, if you just think of district and provinces, these will be shapes, right? These are not just single points, but these will be an aggregate of lot of points, right? So basically, it will be like a circle, or the technical word that we use it will be a polygon. So this polygon is not just one latitude and coordinate, but it will be an aggregate of it. And it will be a very lengthy value that you are entering. But of course, that we have to enter into the DHIS2. So usually this part, entering these locations of coordinates about health facilities, districts and provinces will be done for you by the system administrator of the DHIS2 instance. And you usually don't need to do that when you are analyzing data, but this is for your background information, right? Okay. And then the other thing is you can overlay data, right? So you can put one layer over the other, right? And in this context, each layer is a theme. So for example, one layer would be boundaries. So what we mean by boundaries in DHIS2 is area boundaries. So it could be a boundary of a province or boundary of a district. I will demonstrate it further when I'm showing you what these boundary layers are. And then also this the theme can be made of data elements. So if you can remember that previous graph I was showing Sierra Leone colored in different different districts colored in different colors. So that was basically a theme that was generated by using a data element value, right? So I assume everything is clear up to this point. Are there any questions? Right. So here, basically, I'm trying to provide an overview of the DHIS2 maps application. So basically, when I will explain this further once I open the web browser and do the demonstration. So this is what you see when you open up the maps application, right? So here you are seeing a larger portion onto your right side. So this is the map display area, right? So here the map display area with all selected dimensions and layers. So here we define all the layers and dimensions. So as a aggregate of whatever we define here, the final visualization of the map will appear onto your right side. And onto your left side, this is where you keep on adding layers, right? So here, in fact, we are defining what to be displayed in this map display area, right? So the layers, of course, we have different types of layers, which I'll be defining when I'm doing the demonstration. Right, so there are a few important questions that we have to understand when we are designing maps. The first one is, how can maps help you communicate more effectively?
It gives pattern of the data.
Gives pattern. What kind of patterns, Deepal? It's about basically geographic patterns, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, as he mentioned, just rather than just displaying someone with a table or a chart, you try to put it or with put it into a map with the geographic data, and you will be able to give a better visualization of where this data come from. So you can give more provenance to the where dimension by using maps. And what manipulations will be necessary to a map so that it will print accurately in a desktop publishing document. So this we will be discussing while we are doing the demonstration. And also, what are some key design considerations for this map? So this third factor also we'll be discussing while we are doing the demonstration. Okay. So these will be the contents that we are covering when we do this demonstration. Okay. So there are 8 areas, 8 parts that we are covering in the demonstration. And as I mentioned, if you refer to the book, which has like so many chapters for today in the LMS under map section, that exactly contains everything that I'll be demonstrating now. So you can refer it later and just follow me when I'm doing the demonstration, right? Okay, so I think it's a bit boring to go ahead with the presentation. So from here onwards, I will try to mostly stick to the demonstration so that I will be able to keep the session also more interactive. Okay, right. So let's start with the part 1, which is maps interface and data dimension. Okay. So let me share my screen, the web browser. So before moving on, do you have any questions up to this point? Okay, hope you can see my web browser. So here I have logged into the academy.demos.dhis.org/analytics instance as a, not as a super user, as a normal user. Okay, so let me just try to refresh to see whether I'm logged in, right? Which is more very important. Right, so yes, I'm logged in. So what I do is now I first of all click on this apps icon right over here, apps. Then I go looking for this application called maps. So in previous versions of DHIS2, right, now we are using here 2.34 till up to like 2.32. We had another application called GIS, which was the legacy application we used to use when we want to visualize content in maps. But for now, we are using the DHIS2 maps application. So I'm going to click on that and open it. And once I do that, this is what I see. Okay, so let's try to understand what we are seeing here, right? So to show it in a better way, let me just try to, okay. This is the main maps interface, right? So here you are seeing a larger right portion where you are seeing the actual visualization. And this is the area where we configure the layers. And there are some controls here called file and download. So let me try to click on file and click open. And let me try to open one favorite item which is already there. Okay. So let's try to find something about TB. What do we see? Okay. Do we have any one that is? So let's try to find something about notification about TB. Okay. Let's take this one. So let's take TB notified cases, new and relapse, all forms last quarter. So this is an item which has been designed by somebody in the past and saved as a favorite, right? So let me just click on that one and open. So I click on that one and this is what I get. Okay, can you see? So here, what I'm seeing, this large portion is called the map display area. So here is what we see. A cumulative of what we have configured onto your left side. So here on the left side, we are seeing the layers part, right? So here we configure how the map should be look like. And this is where we are seeing the maps display area. And this is, of course, the map title, TB notified TB cases. new and relapse all forms last quarter, right? So this is what I see as the map's title. Okay, then I'm seeing here, what I'm seeing here is, of course, the map's legend, right? So legend means basically, this is in fact like now in this map, you can see there are so many colors that are applied. So the legend defines what each color is representing, right? So here the lighter yellow color, what it should represent, what type of value range, right? So that is what is actually meant by legend. Just give me a couple of seconds. We have discussed about map's display area, the map's legend, and of course map title, right? So next, of course, what you let's try to focus on to our left side, right? Here we have a button called Add Layer. So what you are seeing here, if you just scroll down, you can see something called base map, and what is selected is called Bing Road. And here we are seeing something called TB notified cases, right? So basically these are two different layers, right? And the Add Layer button gives us the option to add something like this, maybe a thematic layer or a base map on top of this one, right? So that is what we mean by this the left part of this screen, which is the layers button, right? So I will be explaining more about layers in the second part of our demonstration. So just bear with me for now. Just understand this is where we are defining all the layers. Okay. So and if you try to concentrate on to the rightmost part of the screen, there are some controls. So for example, here you can zoom in, zoom out, right? And there's a button where you can reset bearing to north, right? And of course here it puts the entire screen into full screen. And this of course zoomed content. So zoomed content becomes important if we just try to zoom in to somewhere which is not showing data, right? Because accidentally we try to zoom in to an area somewhere in the ocean, right? And then all of a sudden, so let me show again. So I mean, when we are scrolling accidentally, we are somewhere lost in the ocean, right? Around the training land, and we don't know, like I'm trying to scroll everywhere, but I'm not able to find where our training land island is. So what I can do is, if I'm lost like that, I can click on this one, zoomed content, and when I do that, it'll just straight away bring me to the area of our concern, right? So, and this of course is a search for places and address, and this is a measure distance and areas, right? So there are some controls that we have there. And also we have a button here, which is called interpretations. So about interpretations, we will be, of course, there was some issue. I will just go back about interpretations. We will discuss more about it on Thursday. So I'm not going to touch interpretations for now. All right. So that's a basic demonstration about what we have in the maps application, right? Okay. So let me just again open the layer that I had before. Yeah. Okay. And also let us just try to see what we have here. So here, if I start from the bottom, this is something called base map, right? So this base map is the layer that kind of what you see as a background. You can say a background image, something like that. So I can just try to, change different layouts and see how it affects the visualization, something like that, right? Okay, so basically it's kind of the background layer, which actually gives us an idea about what is there in the surrounding area. Okay, and this is in fact what we call a thematic layer. So let me see what we have in this thematic layer. So for me to see it clearly, I can click on this edit button, right? When I click on this edit button, you will be able to see that there are some dimension definitions similar to what we have seen in pivot table and data visualizer. So here I'm seeing the data tab, right? So for example, here we have the indicator and the data dimension defined. And here it's the period dimension that has been defined, and a particular quarter has been selected. And here I'm seeing the user org units have been selected, right? And then under styling, I can see some color selections that has happened, right? So that's what we see in the edit tab of this thematic layer. Right, so we have concluded the first part, which was about maps interface and data dimensions. So in fact, the data dimensions, you must be really familiar with it, because we have all discussed about the data dimensions in last couple of days when we discussed about the pivot table and data visualizer. So let me move on to the layers now.